So tell me, sweet sister, how do we go home?
I don't know.
We go home with an army.
Joffrey is dead. Marcella's been sold like livestock, and now you want to steal my boy. My last boy. I will burn our house to the ground before I let that happen.
Have you ever tried to look at things from a villain's perspective? Would you feel different and feel more sympathetic towards them if you did? In the very first episode of our Character Wars series, we are going to dive into the lives of Viserys Targaryen and Cersei Lannister and see who wins the battle of the most sympathetic villain. Joining me in this discussion is none other than Rebecca from Reading the Pattern. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, great to be here.
We are starting a new video series called the Character Wars, and we will pick the category and two characters based on your votes, and then we'll have a debate on it. Can you explain a little bit about you and the rules of this debate?
Yes, so I'm Rebecca. My channel on YouTube is called Reading the Pattern. I talk a lot about book to screen adaptations with a lot of focus on The Wheel of Time, which is an upcoming TV show and a book series. And I've been talking about other book to screen adaptations as well. For this debate, we have chosen from A Song of Ice and Fire, Viserys and Cersei, and discussing who between these two villains is more deserving of our sympathy. So the rules are one of us will have 3 minutes to make our case for our character. The other person will have 2 minutes to respond and rebut to those arguments. We'll each then get 1 more minute each to go back and forth on that one character before we switch to the other character to do the same. And then at the end, we'll each have a 1 minute final thoughts to wrap up.
And keep in mind, we are playing the devil's advocate here. We all know these are villains, but we are trying to see things from their perspective.
Absolutely. They've done terrible things. We're not trying to say they haven't.
Please keep an open mind about this because as Gaurav Yalpila had said, the only reason we all see him as a villain was because we all read the chapters through a stark point of view. Okay, so there's a little prince who is well loved by his parents, and someday someone rebels against his father. When they are about to lose the war, his father sends him and his mother away, and later he is killed. 9 months later, his mother also dies, giving birth to his sister. Their garrison turns against them, and they are ready to hand them over to their enemy. Sir Willem and a few loyal men smuggle them away to Bravos. 5 years later, Sir Willem also dies. Their servants steal whatever little money they have left, and they are kicked out of their house. After that, a 13-year boy is left on the streets with his 5 years old sister. The prince has to sell whatever little possessions he had left to survive. And when he had to sell his mother's crown, a part of him died with it. The only thing that was left to him after that was his hope of going back home. It became like a prayer for him. So when his sister was of age, he arranged a marriage for her in exchange for getting an army in return, just like the custom was in Westeros. But he was betrayed, and her husband didn't give him his army. When he tried to force them to give him what was promised, he was killed. If this was any other series and was told from Viserys' point of view, he would have been a hero in it, except for one thing. He had the Targaryen madness, and it wasn't his fault that he was born with this gene. So I can definitely feel sympathetic towards him because of it.
But that was all I wanted. What was promised.
So I would say that Viserys and Cersei have a couple of similarities. Like they both lost their mothers in childbirth to a younger sibling, and then they blame that sibling. I think the fact that, he was in childhood like homeless and in exile is like understandably made him feel unsafe, distrustful. My problem with Viserys is that he then directs his anger and cruelty at Daenerys. I don't think he can see her as a threat to himself the way that I think Cersei really believed Tyrion was a threat to her. it seems to me like Viserys felt powerless, but that he chose to take that out on the one person he thought was weaker than him. So he's understandably angry about what's taken from him and what he's suffered, but Daenerys had lost and suffered the exact same things. And I don't think he could have seen her as a threat. So I think he abused her verbally, emotionally, physically. He made her believe it was her fault when she woke the dragon, basically selling her to Khal Drogo to get his throne back. Like, he expressed that he didn't care what she wanted or how she was treated. He told her he would let Khal Drogo's whole Khalasar F-word her, all 40,000 men and their horses, too, if it got him his army. So, like, I don't believe Daenerys would have turned against him if he hadn't treated her that way. But then she gained a little bit of influence. She used it, basically, as I see it, to get rid of her abuser. I think Viserys was wrong to think Daenerys was weaker than him. I see him as someone who, like, kicked the dog, not realizing it was a wolf. So I kind of feel like he also brought his end on himself by treating the one person who loved him that way. So that's where he loses any sympathy from me.
Okay, that was a very good point you made, but there are two differences.
I want to go home.
So do I. I want us both to go home, but they took it from us.
The thought that Viserys held Dany responsible was only in Dany's mind. We have not even once seen Viserys say to her that she killed their mother, unlike Cersei, who tells this to Tyrion over and over again, that he is the one who had killed their mother.
Back when you ripped my mother open on your way out of her and she bled to death.
She was my mother too.
Now they're gone. For the sake of you.
So I think this was only Dany's thoughts. I don't think Viserys really blamed her for this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken care of her the way he did when they were children. He even let her creep into his bed and he told her stories about their family and all that. It seemed like he loved her in the beginning before he had to sell his mother's crown. So I don't think he really blamed her for it. As for selling her for marriage, I think it was the common custom in Westeros. There was nothing new he did there. Hoster Tully married Cat and Liza to Ned and Jon Arryn in exchange for giving his armies to them. Ned was heading south for Robert's rebellion. On the way, he got married to Cat, stayed one night with her, and then took their armies and headed south. His army was given to him immediately, whereas in Viserys' case, he was promised that it will be given to him, but when the turn came to fulfill their promise, instead of going west, Drogo wanted to head east. So it's understandable.
I give him a queen, and he gives me an army. So tell me, sweet sister, how do we go home?
I don't know.
We go home with an army.
It's a good point about how he doesn't tell Daenerys that he blames her for her mother's death. And so that really isn't my main issue at all. It's really the other ways that he treats her. The thing about any sort of kindness that he shows to her, I have a hard time with it, because I think when you do have someone who is abusive to someone, they often do show kindness at other times to sort of make up for the abuses. And it's, I think, in some ways still part of sort of making the person they're abusing feel like they're to blame, right? Like making Daenerys think that she's the one to blame when she wakes the dragon. Like, he's kind to her and loving to her at other times, but if she does something wrong, then it's like almost telling her that what he does to her is her fault. So that's where some of those, telling her stories about their family or any other kindness that he shows her doesn't have as much weight to me. The thing about, the marriage custom of, arranging a marriage, I mean, of course, that's very much true, and that happens for a lot of characters. So again, I don't necessarily have the issue with that. It's more about what he says to her about, basically making it very clear that he does not care at all how she feels about it, and does not care what is done to her in that marriage. Like, Khal Drogo might be like this horrible person who would abuse her as well, and he isn't concerned about that because it's not important to him in comparison to the throne. So it really all just kind of boils down to, I think he treats her like an abuser, And I think she responds to that, and that's why she does what she does.
That was a really good point. And I'm not denying that Viserys wasn't horrible to her. Since we see things from her point of view, I can understand why we feel sympathy towards her and not towards him. But by the time we see things through Dany's point, Viserys's Targaryen genes have already started to make him go mad. At that time, he was already half mad. He had already started to show signs of his madness, just like his father. The only way I can say I feel sympathetic towards him was because of this madness that he didn't ask for. Maybe if he didn't have this madness, he would have been kinder to Danny.
I would argue that Cersei has never felt safe since early childhood. You might say that she should have felt safe since she grew up rich and became a queen, but I think there's a lot more to it. So she, like Viserys, lost her mother at an early age. And she did blame Tyrion. And I think that was wrong of her. But I also consider the fact that she was a child and probably picked that up from Tywin as well. Either way, it meant she never trusted her youngest brother, and she lost the love of her mother. She never had affection or even respect from her father, who treated her like a commodity for her looks and her name, without any brains or abilities or any value, basically, beyond her ability to marry well and keep up the family reputation. So I think the only love she ever had was from Jaime, who she saw as an extension of herself. She was given a grim prophecy as a child that terrified and stuck with her. She was told she would die young, and before that, she would see all of her 3 children die. That gave her even more reason to fear and distrust Tyrion. Wrong as that might be, she felt that. She was given no choice in who she would marry, and she quickly discovered that neither Rhaegar nor Robert loved her. She had some hopes for her marriage to Robert that were immediately dashed when he made that painfully clear by calling her Lyanna on their wedding night. Her marriage quickly became traumatic. Robert was drunkenly forcing himself on her and hurt her. He hit her at other times. I think she did love her children and gave them affection that she had not had, but it was always in the back of her mind that she might lose them. She saw Joffrey killed gruesomely before her eyes. I think that's a pain that no one truly deserves. Marcella was taken out of her reach and ability to protect, and she was constantly afraid for Marcella and Tommen. I think if we look at most of her, like most heinous actions, they're ruthless, but they're also rooted in self-preservation. It's nearly always her acting to protect herself from what she perceives as a direct threat to herself or her children. She feels constantly unsafe, as if the world is against her in spite of her position. She's always acutely aware that her position can also be taken from her at any time, and the few things she loves can be cruelly taken from her. I think her actions towards Tyrion are perhaps the most unforgivable, but reasonable or not, I think she truly sees him as the biggest threat to her. And this becomes increasingly clear as she grows more and more paranoid and irrational where he is concerned, and even plagued by nightmares about it. I think Cersei might be wrong about what is a threat to her, but she is right that she has been treated differently her entire life because she's a woman, and this understandably infuriates her. Having no say in her marriage, being a bargaining chip, she becomes one again after Robert dies. And she sees this acutely because of how Jaime's treated versus her. What would, be overlooked in a man, she gets arrested, stripped, walk of shame, basically, for that.
I don't think Cersei needed any reason to feel unsafe. Yes, she lost her mom at an earlier age, but she still had her father, her brother, and her whole family around her. Unlike Viserys, she didn't lose everything. As for mistreating Tyrion because of the prophecy, I think Tyrion was a little baby when Oberyn and Alia visited them, and she took them to Tyrion, and she heard Tyrion right in front of them and said she wished he was dead. Something like he will die in a few days anyway. And she wanted him to die. And it was way before she went to hear the prophecy.
You had just been born. That's just a baby. And she said he killed my mother. Everyone says he will die soon. I hope they are right. He should not have lived this long.
So her behavior toward Tyrion was already rude. It wasn't because of the prophecy. As for Robert cheating on her, I would have felt bad about it if she hadn't slept with Jamie on the morning of their wedding day. It's like pot and kettle. She can't blame him for being unfaithful to her when she was unfaithful herself. As for loving her children, I would have felt more sympathetic towards her if she hadn't killed her unborn child she got from Robert. She did kill her unborn child just because it wasn't Jamie's. As for treated badly as a woman by our standards in our modern era, I guess that's one thing I would agree on. But it was a medieval era. Even though we can understand how she felt, that's how everyone felt that way during those days.
So I think, yeah, if we were just comparing Cersei and Viserys on like what they lost in childhood, certainly like Viserys lost more in childhood. But, you know, I think for me, it really comes in where things went after that. So, and what is at the root of their actions. So when in regards to Tyrion, I think it's certainly true, right? I think she did have animosity towards him that she took out on him before the prophecy. And again, that's where I would say she was a young child, and I think she absorbed some of that from Tywin. It is wrong, but I think what her actions toward him become worse over time, and I think that's fueled by getting the prophecy and then parts of the prophecy beginning to become true, and then Tyrion making threats against her. So over time, this perceived threat that she sees for him becomes more and more real in her mind, to the point where she is, I think, truly terrified. And so, you know, that's where I think it becomes a bigger deal. You know, the threat he makes against her in her mind is very real. So what she's doing, she sees as self-preservation. And I think that can be seen with a lot of her actions. As for Robert, I mean, I'm not blaming her about the cheating so much as the fact that he like violently forced himself on her and hit her. That's where I think was what really made her hate Robert. I think that's, you know, when even the fact that she wanted to abort his child, I put it down more towards the fact that she hated Robert at that point, rather than just that it wasn't Jamie's. But yes, over time, that relationship becomes more and more toxic. They're both involved in that. But I think Robert was the driving force in what that became, because he never loved her. He let her know that, and he treated her more and more cruelly. And so, yeah, then she gave up on him and she didn't want anything to do with him anymore.
That was a very good point you made about Robert. And I can understand why she hated her. Any other woman in her place would have hated him too. But from the way I see it, even if she had married to Ned Stark and her husband had been loyal to her, she still would have cheated on them. And from the way her mind works, I think she still would have killed any child that she would have gotten from her husband to only have Jamie's children. I don't think she loves Jamie either. She destroyed his career by forcing him to join Aerys's Kingsguard, even though it was a bad thing for him and it actually ruined his future. Also, if we compare her to Viserys, despite all his talk, Viserys has never killed anyone. And Cersei killed her best friend when they were 13 years old just to hide the prophecy. A prophecy she didn't even know would come true at that point. It could have been just a random woman, it could have been a fake prophecy. So to treat her brother poorly just because some woman said something that might not even come true, that's the reason why I don't feel very sympathetic towards her.
The thing about adultery is that it's not considered like to be a big deal at all when men do it. Like Robert did it like crazy and no one cared. So yeah, Cersei did it too. I think the biggest difference is the way she's treated over that, right? Like she's arrested for her adultery. She is like beaten and stripped and made to do the walk of shame and all of that. Which a man would not be treated that way for the same thing. So I'm not convinced that she would have killed Robert's child just because it wasn't Jamie's. I think it was really because of what he did to her. As for how she treats Jamie, I mean, their relationship is toxic. I think they both have some serious psychological scars that draw them to each other. And I think the fact that she sees him as sort of an extension of herself is emblematic of that. But I think that's why she can do things that are sort of self-oriented because she sees him as part of her.
So to wrap it up, they've both been through enough trauma. They both lost their mothers, but Cersei has treated her brother badly. But that's not her only crime. The only bad thing we can say about Viserys is treating Dany poorly. Viserys has never killed anyone, but for Cersei, she even killed her best friend just to hide a prophecy. She has killed many people over the years. She has even sent the people loyal to her to Qyburn to be experimented on. That was a horrible thing, in my opinion. I think it was Felice. She was loyal to her, and just to hide that she was scheming with her, she sent him to Qyburn so he could experiment on her and torture her.
I agree they both suffered a lot, and they're both responding to that in different ways. I would say that the way that Cersei treats her brothers, especially Tyrion, is more rooted in her fear, whereas I think the way Viserys treats Daenerys is more rooted in him trying to control and take out power on somebody else. And that's why I find Cersei a little bit more sympathetic in regards to how she treats her family. And yeah, she has killed people, but I think that some of the murders that are attributed to her have not been proved. They are rumors. Some of them, obviously, we know she did, and others we don't. They're rumors. And we have seen that she's willing in some cases to not kill when she doesn't have to. She tells Jaime he shouldn't have tried to kill Bran. She was going to send Ned to the wall instead of having him killed. So I think she doesn't kill just because she wants to. I think she does it when she feels truly desperate.
Okay, so about not wanting to kill people, that was at the very beginning when she was totally in control. But over the years, as she has lost her children, I think her truer self comes out more and more. And in the last book, The Dance of Dragons, she has committed horrible crimes. She has sent people to get tortured. She has had many people killed when she didn't have to. She sent her men to kill the High Septon when she didn't have to kill. So that wasn't in self-defense or anything.
Yeah, and what I would say is I think in some ways I agree with that, because I think what happens for her over the course of the series is she grows more and more desperate and irrational. There's details about how she's not sleeping, she's having nightmares, she's drinking more to try and deal with this. I think she is kind of losing it as time goes on, because the things that she fears is starting to come true, and she does do things that are counterproductive, that don't help her, and that are needlessly violent at that point, because I think she's just truly becomes desperate as time goes on. So now that we've finished with the debate, the way we are trying to figure out who is the winner is we each came up with 5 points that we were trying to make to convince the other one why the character we picked deserved some of our sympathy. On each of those points, we're rating the other one. So we're giving 2 points for each topic if the other person was very convincing, and 1 point if we were somewhat convinced, and 0 points if we weren't convinced on that argument at all. So with 5 points, 5 topics total, we can get a maximum of 10 points each, and then we'll compare and see who gained more points. And you can get involved in the comments by rating each of us on these 5 points as well. So how many points would we get from you if you were the judge? Okay, so for Viserys, the first point was that he lost his entire family. The life he knew was snatched from him. It was a traumatic experience. So on that point, I said 2 points for that. I think that is convincing as far as, why he may have become who he became. And that certainly was a traumatic experience. Point number 2, he sold his mother's crown to take care of Daenerys, and it broke him. On that point, I said 1. I gave 1 point, saying that was somewhat convincing. I think maybe we need a little bit more time on that point to really explain why that might have been such a big deal for him, or why he did it. So somewhat on that one, I gave 1. And then point 3, that he never killed anyone in his life. So that was unlike Cersei. So on this point, I mean, this is true, but to me, this doesn't help me be more sympathetic to him, basically. It doesn't, to me, explain why he took his actions, why he became who he did. So I didn't give any points on that one, even though it's true, just because it doesn't really help me feel sympathetic to him, I guess. And then on point 4, his only bad action was to mistreat his sister. Again, unlike Cersei, who did other bad things. And on this one, I have to give 0 points too, because this is where I really am not sympathetic to Viserys at all. I think the way he treated Daenerys was so bad. That's basically why, like, I don't have sympathy for him. So I am not convinced by that.
I meant by that point, the Viserys' only crime was that he mistreated his sister. Other than that, he hasn't committed any crimes. But Cersei has killed people. She has sent people to get tortured and experimented on, and those were heinous crimes. So that's what I meant by this point.
When I'm trying to find sympathy for a character, I'm not necessarily thinking, oh, well, they're not as bad as somebody else necessarily. I'm just like, why should I get inside that character's head and feel something for them? It's like, to me, it's like she's the one person that he had, the one person who loved him, the one person who had been through what he had been through, and the way he treats her, to me, show that he doesn't care about her at all. It's hard for me to find any sympathy for him on that particular point, because that to me is like the strongest reason why I feel the way I do about Viserys. Okay, so on point number 5, so he did what he did because he was growing mad, and it was the Targaryen genes, which wasn't his fault. So I gave you 1 point for that. I think that is, I mean, certainly it's not his fault, right? I mean, if he is growing mad somewhat because of the genes, that is not his fault. I think I'm just a little bit unsure whether some of his actions were due to that or not. So that's why I said 1 point, somewhat convincing on that.
Cersei felt unsafe since childhood. So I'm going to have to give 0 for that, because she was among the people, she had Jaime, she had her father, she had her uncles who loved them. So there were a lot of people who loved and cared about her. So I don't think there was a reason to feel unsafe. As for the second point, she had a traumatic marriage. So I'll give 1 point for that, because I agree her relationship with Robert wasn't very great, and Robert was responsible for that too. If she hadn't had a relationship with Jamie at that point, if she hadn't intended to continue that relationship, I would have totally agreed with this point. Third, Cersei grows more and more terrified of losing her children. Okay, I'll give 2 points for that, because any mother would be terrified of losing her children. For fourth, Cersei's most heinous actions are rooted in fear and self-preservation. I'm gonna have to give 0 for that. In my opinion, her most heinous actions were sending people to get tortured or experimented on by Qyburn. Like, it was for self-preservation, but it didn't justify her actions. And she sent people to get tortured and killed just to hide her secrets. She could have given them easier, painless deaths, but that's not what she did. And for fifth point, Cersei is acutely aware of being treated like a powerless commodity and held to different standards because she is a woman. So I'll give 2 points for that. As a woman, it's understandable why she would feel upset if she's not given the same rights as another man would get.
Okay, so I think that we had 4 points for Viserys and 5 points for Cersei in the end.
Yeah,
It was a close one.
right. We don't have enough content from Viserys' point of view. Like with Cersei, we get her point of view in the Dance of Dragons, but we don't get a Viserys' point of view.
No, I think that's relevant for sure. I mean, there's a lot of material where we see some from Cersei's point of view. Now, not all of it makes her sympathetic. Some of it actually is points against her when you see her point of view, but it's true. It gives you more material to potentially get inside her mind. And that's what we're trying to do, is like understand why they did what they did. So I'll be very curious to see like what people say in the comments, and like, they can rate us on each of these 5 points, for each of the characters, and how many points would they give for each character, and see what see what people come up with.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to see. In the second episode of our Character Wars series, we are going to do a debate on Shadow and Bone. What's the category and which characters we are going to choose? You guys can let us know in the comments. And if you haven't read the Shadow and Bone or the Six of Crows series, you should definitely check them out.
And don't forget to tell us in the comments who you felt more sympathetic to after this debate. Do you think Cersei is the winner or Viserys? And we'll look forward to seeing you in the next Character Wars.
If you like this video, don't forget to hit on the like button below, share the video, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you, Rebecca, for joining me in this debate.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, have a great day. Bye-bye.